SuperTalk Mississippi Media production.
Looking for more than just a deal? Experience the Legacy difference today at Legacy GMC in Laurel. Score the best prices on brand new GMCs and browse a standout selection of pre-owned vehicles ready for the road. Visit us today on Highway 15 or at LegacyGMCofLaurel.com.
An encore presentation of the best of mornings with Richard Cross.
All the gold in California is in a bank in the middle of Beverly Hills in somebody else's name. So if you're dreaming about California, it don't matter as long as you played before. California's a brand new game.
Mornings with Richard Cross is brought to you by MWG Employer Services. Running a business is tough, and if you're struggling with HR, benefits, and payroll, you're not alone. That's where MWG Employer Services comes in. They can provide a full range of employer services plus a custom plan that fits you. Give them a call today, 601-206-7966, or go to MWGEmployerServices.com. We are fortunate to have Mr. Bill Cork in studio this morning. He's the executive director of the Mississippi Development Authority. He is recruiting businesses, working in step with the governor's office to make sure that those businesses make sense in Mississippi. And it has been a busy 18 months, 24 months, certainly busy last 12 months. Bill, good morning to you.
Good morning, Richard. The last time you and I were on the radio together, it was at the Neshoba County Fair, and it was a lot warmer than it is now.
You know what I might give for some of that warmth right about now? With zero complaints about dust or mud or red dirt or anything else. What a time it has been. Let's start here. This is not necessarily economic development related. What role does MDA play in disaster recovery?
It's a good question, Richard. MDA has the Disaster Recovery Office for the state that deals with long-term disaster recovery after major storms. Right now, we're actively engaged in the tornado activity from Rolling Fork and some of the southwest Mississippi tornadoes. Those are ongoing long-term plays. What MDA does is work with the Department of Housing and Urban Development to assess long-term unmet needs after these storms are over. Okay. We'll go back into the communities. Chuck Bierman at MDA and his team will go into these communities. They will assess and survey what they call the unmet needs. What didn't FEMA and MEMA and all the immediate disaster folks take care of? Things like long-term sustainability of our utility systems, water systems, sewer systems. Housing is a huge part of that, particularly low and moderate income housing. So if folks were displaced or didn't have insurance and were unable to get their housing situation resolved, these programs are designed to help with that long-term recovery. So we won't be going into the storm area here for another couple months probably. Let it get through the initial response phase, and then we'll start our long-term recovery phase.
There are a lot of people that, when going through something like this, they want all the answers, they want all the resources, and they want them right now. It doesn't always work like that. There is immediate response, but then, you talk about this program through MDA that is a much longer-term play, and some of the reimbursement that the state gets from the federal government, that the local governments get from the state or the federal government, they take a while.
That's correct, Richard. And I think as taxpayers, we want to make sure we all have a fast and effective response, but we also want to just get a big check and start wasting money. So there has to be a need that has to be demonstrated. And one of the things I would encourage community leaders, homeowners, and others to do is, I know they're going through a tremendous a tragic time right now as they try to recover their personal lives and their communities, but take really good notes. I know you talked about this earlier about how do you document the expenses that you have so you can get reimbursed. But that's the only way it will really work effectively is if the community leaders and the individual homeowners really take notes and keep good records, take pictures with your phone of all the damage that's occurring. All that helps when it comes to accessing those recovery resources.
2025 was a banner year for the state of Mississippi in terms of economic development. It was a banner year for the entire team in your office. Is there any possible way that you can replicate 2025 and 2026?
Yes. We'll beat 2025 probably in 2026.
Really?
Which was a record year for us, $21.5 billion in capital investment, about 3,000 jobs last year alone, which dwarfed all the prior years. And we're off to a really good start. 2026, we already announced a $20 billion project in South Haven with XAI.
So that's going on 26's ledger, not 25's?
That is correct.
Okay.
That's a 2026 number. Total, since Tate Reeves got elected, we've announced over $66 billion in capital investment and almost 24,000 jobs. So it's been an amazing run, and it just continues. These projects, Richard, are just getting bigger and bigger and more energy intensive. And with all of the compute demand that's required, but also in advanced manufacturing, these projects are just lots of robotics and technology in them. They're just really remarkable what we're seeing.
You reached out to me a few weeks ago. I had a guest that mentioned that inevitably energy costs were going to go up for consumers based on some of these data centers that are going in because of the massive energy needs. You told me that at least for most of the projects in Mississippi, that is not a concern for you, at least not right now, because of the way that some of these proposals have been put together, the projects have been written. Can you explain that in a little more detail?
Sure. Well, every data center is not the same, and every company that operates in this space is not the same. So when people talk about data centers generally, I always ask, well, which one are you talking about? And then there's a special answer for each particular customer. But let me just pick a couple of the big ones which will get attention. So, for example,
Sure.
AWS. When AWS announced in Madison and in Warren County just last year, their expansion, that they're buying all that power and generation directly through Entergy. So they're writing a big check to develop new power generation, solar, a variety of other different technologies to serve their need. And Entergy is an investor-owned utility that's regulated by the Public Utilities Commission. So, Richard, if your listeners are in Entergy's territory, how would they know whether or not their rates are going up based on this data center? Well, in regulated utility territory, they must take a rate case to the Public Service Commission. That's the only way they can get their rates increased as a result of an industrial development. And the Public Service Commission has received no such rate case. There's nothing planned. And if you listen to what Haley Fisackerly, the CEO of Entergy Mississippi, has done in multiple venues, he said, this isn't going to happen. We're not going to raise your rates due to these things. In fact, they're investing, I think they invested over $100 million on transmission upgrades out of their own pocket to try to help stabilize the grid and make sure we could accommodate this new development. So XAI, they're bringing their own generation with them. They located this data center cluster in South Tennessee and North Mississippi around an old power plant site, and published reports indicate that Elon Musk has bought over 1.9 gigawatts of new Korean manufactured generators to be placed in an old Duke power plant site in South Haven. That's got to go through permitting. It's going to have to go through a whole process to get that done. That's all publicly regulated, and the public will have a chance to weigh in. So those are some examples on the power side where, that's just being resolved. And the way you'll know is because if we see a public utility rate case, then we'll all be able to stand in line outside the Public Service Commission and complain about our rates going up. But that hasn't happened.
Well, one thing that Haley Fisackerly pointed out, I think it was either last week or 2 weeks ago, he said, there is a good chance that your energy costs are going to go up because the cost of energy is going up in some areas and the demand is going up, but it is not directly tied to these data center projects. And so there is a difference in your electric bill goes up a little bit because power costs more, and there's a new data center going in one county over or in the county in which you live, and their needs are causing your bill to get higher.
That's right, Richard. I mean, just like any other utility, costs go up. Growth happens. You have to build new infrastructure. You have aging infrastructure that's aging out that has to be replaced. All that gets put into the cost model, and sometimes the rates have to increase in order to accommodate just our ordinary course of doing business. Of course, there's been inflation. There's been volatile natural gas prices. All those things implicate your bill. And so the question is, what are these data centers causing? That's really the fundamental question. And right now, we're not seeing those impacts.
Elon Musk is probably the most famous technology entrepreneur that is out there. His companies have transformed the way that the world works in a lot of ways. What has it been like working with XAI and maybe some of the other Elon Musk affiliated companies?
Well, the one thing that comes to my mind is insane speed. These are almost inhuman people, the way they do business. I've been working with CEOs of companies and dealing with economic development projects for over 30 years, and I have never in my career experienced the kind of insane speed that these guys work at. It's sort of like fire, ready, aim. They kind of just, it's a bias for action that I've never really seen, and maybe when you've got a checkbook as big as Elon Musk, that's possible. You can take some risks like that. So that's the biggest difference. But the other thing is they have a tremendous heart, really. In fact, I was on the phone yesterday with company representatives in South Haven. Elon Musk is donating over 500 generators to support the recovery effort, and I watched them. Pictures were sent to me yesterday of them loading up the trucks in Atlanta, ready to ship 500 Generac generators to Tippah County. They'll be arriving before noon today. So wow. These are good stewards, I think, not only of what they're trying to do technologically, but they recognize that the community partnership is important as well.
Bill Cork, Executive Director with MDA, will continue the conversation on the other side of this break. It's Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk Mississippi, streaming online at supertalk.fm and SuperTalk TV.
More of the best of Mornings with Richard Cross next.
Ever feel like your brain has...
This is an encore presentation of the best of Mornings with Richard Cross.
Welcome back. It is Mornings with Richard Cross, presented by Community Bank, rooted in our community, communitybank.net. Bill Cork is my guest with the Mississippi Development Authority. He's the executive director there. Travels a lot and has had a really, really busy stretch with new economic development coming to the state of Mississippi. We got a question on the C Spire text line. They were asking about a specific location, and I don't know if you can answer this, but maybe opens a conversation more generally. I was curious if there was a new company that might be on the horizon for the old Levi's plant in Gluckstadt. I don't know if you can answer that specifically, but there are lots of places across the state where you've got former plants or former major companies that are no longer in existence and space is open. How does that factor into plans for companies that might be looking at coming in?
Super high demand for Mississippi existing buildings. So if you've got an empty building anywhere in the state of any kind of size, proximate to infrastructure like interstate highways, utilities, they're in high demand. I know that we have shown the Levi's building multiple times. Joey Deason up in Madison County is facilitating a lot of those site visits, but our team has been involved in a number of projects there looking at that site. Do we have anything to announce yet? No, but anything like that, gets just a lot of interest.
Bill, you have worked extensively with Link in the Golden Triangle, the Development Link partnership there. We are seeing more regional partnerships that have been announced. There's one in the general area of where I live. With Lafayette, Panola, Tate, and Yalobusha counties. There's been a lot of talk about the three Gulf Coast counties coming together and trying to work together to create a regional partnership and maybe even some other areas of the state. How is that going?
I think regionalization is a good thing as long as it's a coalition of the willing, and that you've got a mission that's clearly identified that keeps everybody aligned. Especially in the rural areas where you don't have a lot of financial resources. I'm a fan of regionalization because it allows you to pool your resource and act bigger than any one individual could actually act in the market. And what I mean by that is, hiring talent like a Joe Max Higgins is expensive. The travel you need to do is expensive. The product development and developing the infrastructure is expensive. So in areas where you're resource constrained, finding partners that are willing to work together to get big things done, I think, is helpful. Where you've got a lot of existing resources, it's probably a little bit more challenging to defend a regionalization play just because you already got a lot of interest, money, people, it makes it more challenging. So, and that's one of the reasons why I think the coast is really not pulled together a regional organization. You got about 12 different municipal entities down there, 3 airports, multiple ports. All of them are well-resourced, asset-based, and they've got a day job to keep all that running. So to try to regionalize down there makes it a little bit more difficult, just because it's there's already a lot of financial incentive to take care of your own.
You said coalition of the willing, and that's an interesting way to phrase it. Probably an important way to phrase it. We almost always, when we visit, get questions about, hey, what about Southwest Mississippi? What about the Delta? Those are areas that, at least on the surface, could benefit from a major economic development project that brings in jobs. What do you say about that, and how does that factor into that coalition of the willing, as you used the phrase you used just a moment ago?
Well, I think it's an understandable question. I think most average citizens would like to know what's going on in their community and why they're not seeing some of the development that other areas of the states are seeing. And I get that. Worked in rural communities almost my entire career, and understand the interest there in trying to see how something could work. I think the proper question to be asking is, what can we be doing as a community to make sure we can win and position ourselves to win in this market? Not why didn't I get, but what are we doing to position? And that's the question that when people turn that inward and start to look at asking the questions in their community of what might be preventing them from winning projects, that you begin to start to have the revelations about what needs to happen to win projects. Look, I wish I was a wizard that had a magic wand and could just tap any county in the state and say, you're going to get a data center, you're going to get a big distribution center, or you're going to get an advanced manufacturer. But that's not how it works. I mean, you have to have the product in play, and then companies have to have a demand for that product. It's a free market, and the companies decide where they go. So I think fundamentally what I've been trying to do, and what Governor Reeves has really advocated for, is for communities to mobilize around the idea of economic development, to educate themselves on what it takes to win, and then put a plan in place to begin to advance their community agenda around whatever that objective may be.
I don't know that controversy is the right word, but there was at least a difference of opinion as it pertains to the Gulf Coast Restoration Fund. There's money that is allocated that I guess this is related to BP oil spill money from years ago. And the Gulf Coast Restoration Fund committee or council generally decides or has recommendations on where those dollars go. They work in conjunction with you. MDA then makes a recommendation to the legislature about how those funds should be distributed. Some interesting recommendations that came from your office this year on what should be done with that money, that it should be focused on some bigger projects, some regional projects, and maybe not as many smaller projects. There was some pushback from some of the representation on the coast about that recommendation. Where does that stand?
Well, it stands right now. It's with the legislature.
Okay.
I sent a 109-page document to them recommending what should happen with the Gulf Coast Restoration Funds. By the way, they haven't appropriated any of those dollars for the last couple of years, so it's been accruing. There's like $65 million in that pot of money right now. And there's an opportunity when you have that money to do some really big things. If you're only getting it in small increments and you try to spend it all every year, you're limited on what you can do. The truth of the matter, Richard, is that the projects and the process that works today have worked just fine as far as it goes. The projects that are being nominated through the portal, evaluated by MDA, reviewed by the Gulf Coast Restoration Advisory Board, and then ultimately comes to the executive director for a final recommendation to the legislature, they're all good projects. They're all represent the needs of the communities. But when you take a look at the entire portfolio of projects this year, two things stood out. Number one is we didn't really see anything transformational. And by that I mean really...
I was wondering if you were going to use that word, transformational.
Well, and it deserves a definition because I think the governor's been very clear about that. What he wants to see are the kinds of investments that will create and attract new industry that brings in new employment opportunities at wages above the local county average wages. So we see a lot of maintenance projects and a lot of sidewalk projects and fixing the air conditioner at City Hall or something. Those aren't the kind of projects that are actually going to help you move the needle on creating new and important jobs for the citizens of the coast. Some of those projects that came through did that, and there was a few of those that we actually tapped to recommend to be approved. But at the end of the day, the process is simple, Richard. I make a recommendation, and the legislature and the governor can choose to either wipe their nose with it or take it. Okay? I have zero power to compel anybody to do anything. If anybody watched Schoolhouse Rock, they know how a bill becomes a law, and this money has to go through the appropriations process, become a bill signed by the governor. And then once that's signed, MDA executes it faithfully. There shouldn't be any controversy around these ideas because at the end of the day, the legislature gets to decide with the governor what gets spent.
I suppose it is worth mentioning that your position is one that is appointed by the governor, and so the recommendations that you are making are generally in line with the policies that he's trying to implement, right?
That's correct. I mean, I think the governor and I have a pretty good relationship, and I've worked with him, almost on a daily basis doing economic development. I got a good handle on what I think he's looking for. I just articulated his position on transformational projects, and I'm reiterating that to the legislature. So they can pick a fight with me, but there's a guy that lives in a little white house down the street from MDA that they might want to have a conversation with.
In our last few minutes, and we'll wrap this up on the other side of the break, the legislative session is now a month old, or almost a month old, for 2026, meaning there are only 2 months left, absent any special sessions. Hopefully that's not the case, but we'll wait and see on that. What are you asking of the legislature this year?
Well, we have a pretty big agenda that was outlined fairly clearly in the governor's executive budget request, and they really focus around energy, Richard. This issue of energy is critically important to making sure that we have an industrial development future for the state of Mississippi. It's almost a 1-to-1 correlation in GDP growth with energy growth. And so the governor is really trying to push on all cylinders here to make sure we have an energy strategy that's consistent with his power play initiative that he announced last May. So $100 million for advanced purchase and deposits on major transmission, substation, switchgear that'll help us advance economic development around energy. $20 million request for site development support to help us get a jump on getting these industrial parks utility served. And a $3 million venture fund to help us work on new technology ventures and to become a thought leader in the energy space. That's the big asks this year of the legislature, in addition to our traditional refills and basically a level top-line budget for the agency. But we're out there pushing those issues. We think we have broad support for those, and we're eager to see the legislature act on them.
I was going to say, at this point, what sort of feedback have you gotten from the legislature?
So far, so good, but, all kinds of mischief is still possible, Richard.
Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk Mississippi. We're back with you right after this.
More of the best in mornings with Richard Cross. Next.
People ask me all the time.
Encore presentation of the best of mornings with Richard Cross.
Here with Mornings on SuperTalk Mississippi. This is Lucian Smith in for Richard Cross. Remember, Mornings with Richard Cross is presented by Community Bank. At Community Bank, we're more than just a place to manage your money. We're your neighbors, your partners, and your trusted financial advisors. For decades, we've been rooted in our community, helping families, small businesses, and individuals achieve their dreams. Whether it's opening your first savings account, planning for a brighter future, or growing your business, we're here every step of the way. We're dedicated to our customers, committed to your success, and always here when you need us. Community Bank, rooted in our community, member FDIC. Well, on the line with us is Stafford Sheridan, the author of Meat and Three, a restaurateur and farmer. Stafford, how you doing?
I'm better than I deserve this morning. What about you?
I'm doing great. I appreciate your taking the time to be with us this morning.
Yeah.
I'd say it's early.
I'm excited to be here.
I'd guess in your line of work, 8 o'clock is not early.
No, that's not early. I learned a long time ago that work starts about 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah, and no stopping, no free weekends, I'd imagine.
This time of the year, we take a minute or two to go duck hunting or deer hunting or something. So there's that.
Right. It's seasonal, though, rather than 40 hours a week.
Sure. It's always at least 40. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
One question I have, though.
Please.
Obviously, you're in Drew. How's the duck season been so far, Stafford? This is Lance here. I know the chicken season's good because I can tell on your plate there, but how about the duck season?
Yeah, we never run out of chicken, but the duck season has been so-so. I was a duck hunting guide back in the 90s and early 2000s. It's nothing like that anymore, but we've had a pretty decent season this year.
Any bands? You taking home any trophies? No, not yet.
No trophies this year. No trophies.
Well, tell us a little bit about the book, Meat and Three, which is MEET for anybody who's on the radio and not watching us on C Spire television right now.
Originally I was kind of inspired by stories of going over to my grandmother's house and mowing her yard and eating food with her. She had a lot of grandkids, but I got a lot of one-on-one time with her because one of my chores was mowing her yard. And then that kind of came into eating meat and threes out on the farm, stopping by the little local gas stations, Sullivan's Barbecue, Robinson's. And the more I wrote this book, it kind of became more about the characters that I've met along the way. And we kind of, as a play on words, went with Meat and Three. But the funny thing about it is, it's my story, but Lucian, it's your story too. If you grew up in Mississippi, you had this story, the same story. Now, people outside of the state don't really understand that. But I think in Mississippi, if you read this book, you're going to be reading your own story to a degree.
Yeah, I've heard it described. I've not yet had the chance to read it, but I've heard it described as part memoir, part philosophy of life. Is that a pretty good description?
It really is, and this idea how often food and friendship and all those things intersect, and I think that's the human condition. But for sure in Mississippi, food's such a big part of our culture and the way we relate to each other, and we cook together and we eat together and we break bread together and we do it at Sunday church. But really it's, and I've got my F's. Robert St. John's got his F's. I got mine too. But it's faith, family, farming, and food.
There we go.
And that's really what the book's about.
Hey, what's the best way, if folks want to get the book? What's the best way to get it? I imagine it's available in any retailer.
But you can walk in any bookstore and they can order it if they don't have it. I love to support my local bookstores. I know that Square Books in Oxford's got quite a few of them. I went by the other day and signed some more. But you can also, your traditional, I say traditional, your online retailers have it, like Amazon now. And Barnes & Noble and all that. Yeah, that is, as bad as I hate to say that, because I have a little small restaurant in Drew, Mississippi that kind of mimics my grandmother's style of cooking. But, so I'm a big supporter of mom and pop. So if you could go in your mom and pops and order it, a lot of them have it in stock, but you can also order it on Amazon.
Well, the beauty of those mom and pop bookstores to me is you're going in there with people who actually read books. I mean, you can have a conversation with them about what to read, and they've read it. It wasn't just pushed out by the central office on what they're trying to move that week.
Absolutely. When I was in Square Books the other day, I was like, hey, what book do I need to buy while I'm in here? Because they know. Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. We always try to buy books from our local bookstore here in Jackson because the folks at Lemuria, they read books. They can tell you what's good because they've actually read them. What got you? What got you interested in writing a book? Is this your first book?
This is my first book, and it's kind of a hybrid, self-published, but I do have a publisher thing. And I've always liked writing. I've written a couple things for Delta Magazine, Mississippi Magazine, and a business coach of mine said, Stafford, you really need to write a book because it is a business card. I'm not going to lie. It's a business card in a way. So I give a lot. The book selling business is okay, but the book giving away business is really good. So I do give quite a few copies away. And it is, sometimes you just got something you want to say, you don't know why you want to say it, but I wanted to write about something that I knew from my first book, and that was growing up in Drew, Mississippi, and Archie's hometown. He described it as Mayberry, and even though I'm a lot younger than Archie, it was Mayberry for me too, man. I had a great childhood growing up in Mississippi.
So does it go through? So sort of give us a sense of the narrative arc of the book. I mean, does this start with your childhood and go from there, or how does it play out?
It starts with my adoption story. I was adopted, and that's kind of a theme in the book a little bit. That this idea that, and as an adult, you and I can have a conversation about my birth parents, why they had to give me up. There could be a million reasons that I don't know. But as a kid, all you know is the people that should have wanted you when you were vulnerable didn't. Mm-hmm. And, just kind of by chance almost, there's a story in the book of my parents had to pass this water test, and they couldn't pass it to get me. And the guy that was taking the water went by his own house, got water out of his tap so that I could go home.
Oh, like a literal water safety?
Yes, water safety, because they lived in the country. They were not on a community water system.
Yeah.
And just little stories like that all through the book, and we all have those stories where these little things that we don't even know about transform our lives in ways that we could never guess. And I mean, I'm a literal baby, and that happens. It's like my first real gift was getting to go home to Drew, Mississippi. And that kind of is the arc all the way through the book, are these chance meetings and just these characters that I meet along the way in Drew, Mississippi. All these father figures I ended up with because I got given up for adoption,
And you're talk a little bit about the philosophy of life that's in there. You mentioned it a little bit earlier, but talk a little bit about about sort of that piece of it.
Zig Ziglar from Yazoo City, I think, says it best. You can have anything you want in life as long as you help enough other people get what they want out of life. And it really is about relationships. I mean, life is about relationships. It's about who you meet and how you treat them. And I think if I didn't write it this way in the book, and I wish I had, but at the end of the day, I do think that's the lesson from the book. Now, there's some little business things. I talk a little bit about the struggles we went through as a small town restaurant in Drew, Mississippi, that was only supposed to last 6 months, and 21 years later, we're still there. Huh. But so it's a little bit of business advice in there, but really it's about relationships. So that's my philosophy on life is it's business is about relationships,
Well, and life is too. I mean, the happiest people tend to be the ones who have the healthiest, happiest relationships with other folks.
Well, that's kind of my point. It's like the same things that would make me and you friends also could make me and you great business partners,
right.
Or great, customer business owner relationship or whatever. But life is just about relationships. It's about the people you meet along the way. My high school English teacher, Bobby Dubard, she's 90, just turned 92, I think. She had me write a paper in high school, this poem that Tennyson did. And in it, he says, "We're a part of all we've met." And that really is what the book's about at the end of the day. We are a part of all we've met.
That's a great way to sum it up. Stafford, we're coming up on a break here in a second. You stick with us. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that restaurant and fried chicken and some other good Southern food topics.
Gas station food, man.
There we go. We'll have more coming up next.
Save his life, call his wife in. Nothing to say, but what a day. How's your boy been? Nothing to do, it's up to you. I've got nothing to say, but it's okay. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Going to work, don't wanna go, feeling low down. Heading for home, you start to roam, then you're in town. Everybody knows there's nothing doing. Everything is closed, it's like a ruin. Everyone you see is half asleep, and you're on your own.
More of the best of Mornings with Richard Cross next.
This is where the story of your state gets told each day. We're proud to cover the Magnolia State like nobody else. SuperTalk Mississippi.
We all hear the radio ad.
It's an encore presentation of the best of Mornings with Richard Cross.
I feel I'm growing.
Good morning, everybody. This is Lucian Smith here on Mornings on SuperTalk Mississippi with my man Lance Talbert. That's true. That's true. And Tommy in Meridian has hooked it up here. The looks like you can get pickled eggs and feet and hocks and all sorts of
lips,
things.
Gallon jug if you need them, it says. Hey, and one other from that same area is the Kewanee gas station. If you haven't ever been there, right at the Tumsuba exit, I believe it's been a couple years since I've been, but buddy, you talking about some good food around Tumsuba, Mississippi. So there's two of them there back to back saying, hey, if you want the good stuff, Tumsuba is where you go.
Well, we didn't really we talked a bunch about school choice, but didn't get into much on the national front. But I'll say one thing, just because we hadn't had much of a chance to talk about it. The Democrats are just amazing at locking in on a narrative.
Man, and if you say it enough, right?
Exactly.
Then it seems their folks have a tendency to believe. I mean, the Nancy Pelosi interview regarding insider trading or congressional members trading, to me, was one of the unique ones a couple days ago. Questioned on that, she was just like, "Oh no, I've never done anything like that. It's just my husband.
It's just false.
And
it's
nobody.
False.
I don't believe anybody's doing it." And as Trump said, and I'm going to leave it with you, nobody in the history of finance, I worked in it, has ever had returns like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and there's at least one app that lets you put some money tracking these folks' portfolios, which, to be honest, is probably not I'm not giving financial advice. She's leaving, but I hadn't done it, but I'd be tempted to put a little money there and just see what happens.
It was something we did back in the years that I worked in it. Was you followed people like Warren Buffett. Block trades were very indicative of where money was moving. But a lot of times you're getting it after the publication. They've gotten in so much earlier because of their ability,
maybe getting a little information.
Getting a little, and the most average retail investors aren't working with millions of dollars to put into one thing.
Right.
They're spreading that. So, you're never going to get the huge returns when you're diversifying. But when there's a sure thing and you're one of the ones that made the law.
Bet on black or whatever it happens. Yeah, exactly.
Pull a Wesley Snipes. Always bet on black.
Exactly.
And that's the way I feel. If you know it's coming, you put your money down.
Yeah, that's right.
You'll have a great chance of, if you control those things, coming out on the other side of that. But it's a lot more difficult for average people like us that don't have that.
Yeah, well, and it's the reason that I think these bans on congressional trading make an awful lot of sense, because you really ought to be. I mean, you can put it all in a mutual fund, right? And, they'll get reasonable appreciation over time, but sitting there and trading on individual stocks when they've got an exception from the insider trading laws, I do think is unfair.
But you think about, what was her name? I just lost her name. Snoop Dogg's buddy. Martha Stewart.
Oh yeah, Martha Stewart.
She goes to jail for a while. But you can become a senator if you don't get caught, I guess.
Well, I was thinking about the Minneapolis stuff because we were told that this ICE officer who shot the woman who had turned her car towards him. The mayor said, first we were told she was trying to get out of there. She was confused. She had just dropped her kid off at school, and then we learned that actually she was a trained protester who was there to protest and disrupt ICE, and then we were told that the car didn't touch him and all this, and we found out yesterday that he had internal bleeding because the car hit him so
on
hard.
His head.
Yeah, I mean it just, but the media narrative hadn't shifted. They want to tell this story that you've got these evil ICE agents who are going around and just executing American citizens because it plays into a narrative that's politically helpful for them, even though it is just completely dishonest. And the media helps them. You saw it with an ICE agent shot a Venezuelan immigrant in the leg, and the headlines are all ICE agent shoots Venezuelan in the leg. They don't mention the fact that the guy was getting ambushed by people who were trying to hurt him because he was an ICE agent.
You seen what they did to some of the vehicles, stealing documents, stealing everything they could find, and burning and
getting egged on.
Oh yeah,
I mean the governor of Minnesota, who keeps in some interviews saying, "Oh, we gotta take the tone down. Let's lower the temperature," has also put stuff out that he wants people to take pictures of ICE agents so that they can be held accountable for these were his words, the atrocities being perpetrated on people in Minnesota. I mean, it's just so dishonest.
How in the world, and I'm going to leave you to answer this, how in the world can one state like Minnesota go so far off the reservation to, it doesn't even look like America at the point we are?
I think they've just got, I think the left, especially these folks who have national ambitions, have gotten they're just totally captive to this extremist base.
Is it for money?
I think it's for power. I think they think, if they were to say, well, maybe we should actually secure the borders, which 20 years ago, Obama ran on securing the borders. He criticized George W. Bush for not doing enough to secure the borders. But that's no longer fashionable. And if you said that today in the Democratic Party, like lots of things you could have said 20 years ago in the Democratic Party, they'll run you out of it. But that's where we are. So our job as a movement is to be as stable and sane as possible, because that contrast will serve us well and let us keep making decisions. Y'all, thank you for starting your Friday here with Mornings on SuperTalk Mississippi. This has been Lucian Smith. Coming up next is Fox News, followed by SuperTalk Mississippi News.
Got well paid, blew it all at the penny arcade.
More of the best of Mornings with Richard Cross next. This is an encore presentation of the best of Mornings with Richard Cross.
Back again with you. It's Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk Mississippi, streaming at supertalk.fm and SuperTalk TV. Glad to welcome our first guest. And in terms of expertise in a particular area, Mandy Gunasekara has it in spades when it comes to the EPA. She was chief of staff at the Environmental Protection Agency during the first Trump administration. And feels like a great person to talk about a major story that broke last week. Mandy, good morning to you.
Hey, good morning. Good to be with you.
I appreciate your time very much. I want to read this to you from a CBS News story, so consider the source. The greenhouse gases emitted from sources like cars, trucks, and power plants, major contributors to climate change, will no longer be regulated by the federal government following an announcement from Lee Zeldin. The administration's action formally repeals what is known as the endangerment finding, and the White House called this the single largest deregulatory action in American history. That's been a buzzword for this administration, deregulation. What do we need to know right now about the decision that was made last week?
Yeah, it was a really important decision, and it has to do with a legal document that basically was the activating element to the entirety of greenhouse gas regulations across the entire administration. For the everyday person, that may not mean a lot, but what it has meant when you go and you put gas in your car, when you go buy groceries at the store, or you're purchasing a vehicle, that it comes with added costs. And these costs were incrementally more, starting back in 2012 when it comes to vehicle regulation. And they've expanded significantly. So what it will do, it will put downward pressure on the price of those basic things that everyone has to purchase to participate in modern life. And it will be a part of President Trump making good on his promise to make life more affordable again. The other practical piece of it, as it pertains particularly to cars and trucks, is some of the gimmicks that vehicle manufacturers put in cars to comply with these unworkable standards, things like the start-stop part of your vehicle where your engine stops at the stop sign and then starts quickly. It's awful. Those go away because car manufacturers no longer have to put those in to comply with the standard because that standard is no longer there. So it's a huge deal. It's an overall cost savings of $1.3 trillion. This is $1.1 trillion that will be put into the vehicle manufacturing, the industry itself, to make better cars, cheaper cars, and to give consumers a choice of what actually will work for them. And then $0.2 trillion that will no longer be wasted on forcing out the build out of infrastructure that doesn't respond to consumer demand. I'm talking about these plug-in stations where you had billions of dollars set aside by Congress that didn't result in the actual building out. That's something for the private sector, for the Teslas of the world to figure out, and they figure out quite well, not for the federal government to try to mandate and do what they do, which is waste taxpayer dollars in the process.
Mandy, I guess maybe I'm a little bit of a cynic in terms of the pricing piece. Like, I agree that getting rid of some of these regulations makes a lot of sense. I mean, just because they're stupid. Like, I think the start-stop function is ridiculous because it's annoying, not so much because I'm convinced that it's killing the environment and it needs to be there. But I feel like when we see prices go up, we don't really see prices go back down. They might stabilize or they might stay kind of flat and where they are. Am I wrong to think that maybe this doesn't lead to some massive, there's more money in our pocket, but at least it stops the upward trend?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is an absolute fair criticism of some of the general talking points, but the cost savings are macro. And so that's why it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have $5 extra in your pocket every day. What it does is it stops that trend of things going up significantly, and it also makes the economy healthier. You've seen a lot of this turning around since the start of last year. It's not just the president's deregulatory agenda. It's his tax agenda that he passed early on with Congress. It's also the tariff mechanisms that will eventually pay out in terms of leveling the costs that are generated in the United States versus are paid elsewhere. Those savings, if you will, mean they largely go to the entities that drive economic productivity. So the factories, the power generators, the widget makers across the country. And so that means that those dollars, instead of investing in the bureaucracy of Washington, D.C. to make life more expensive and complex, they're going into the businesses where they can expand. They can build out the latest and greatest technologies. They're making things more efficiently. They're hiring more people, and there is a residual benefit to that. So, yeah, it's incremental. It's a bigger picture of cost savings, but it does actually matter. And for the American people, it'll be like it was back in 2018, really, where you felt like your dollar went a little bit further. You may not have understood all the macroeconomics at work, but it felt like your dollar went a little bit further. You were able to get that new truck. You had a little bit more in your savings, a little bit more on the credit side. And that's what the president is ultimately looking at, and the way that it will transcend down to the everyday American.
Mandy Gunasekar is my guest, former chief of staff at the Environmental Protection Agency. Lee Zeldin is running that agency now. We've talked in the past a little bit about Lee and the job that he's doing, and I think has gotten pretty high marks. I'm by no stretch of the imagination a tree hugger, but I'm not a climate denier either. I mean, I think it's fair to say that our globe is changing, but it always has changed. What impact does this have on, I mean, we talked about getting rid of the greenhouse gas emissions standards and CO2 and methane and all of those things. What effect does this have on the environment?
Zero. For a number of reasons.
Okay.
The majority of the regulations, quote unquote regulations, were never in effect or on the books because they've been caught up in legal battles really since they have been finalized from an EPA perspective. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is that the real tangible results of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and let me say something that's really important because the left always conflates. There's traditional air pollutants, things like particulate matter, ozone, nitrous oxide. EPA has a legally viable and justifiable authority to regulate those pollutants, which they do, and they do quite well. There's a balance mechanism that's sometimes missing, but it's there. Greenhouse gases are totally different. And this is where it goes beyond what EPA was actually authorized to regulate by virtue of laws passed by Congress. Those standards for greenhouse gases were never really on the books, number one. And number two, the true gains in this space where we've reduced emissions while increasing productivity have come from advancements in the private sector, mainly the oil and gas extraction industries, advancements like hydraulic fracturing, horizontal drilling, these sorts of mechanisms that the everyday American consumer doesn't need to think about. But what the men and women of U.S. energy have figured out is how to extract resources, refine them, transport them, and deliver them to market in really, really efficient ways so that we have reliable, affordable, low-cost energy, but we aren't sacrificing the environment in the process. It's taken decades to get to this point where they figured out how to produce these resources in a way that doesn't negatively impact the environment, but they've done it. And since 2005, you don't hear this often, the United States leads the world in overall greenhouse gas reductions, while at the same time we've continued to see not constant but steady economic growth.
So you said since 2005, which is obviously before the 2012 regulations that we were talking about. Does this see greenhouse gas emissions for the United States spike? Or is that what you're talking about because of all of that, all the progress in manufacturing and cleaner production that we're in a good shape to stay there?
Yeah, what I'm saying is that the gains that we have made is because of private sector innovations.
Okay.
And that those trends of reducing overall emissions will continue regardless of what the agency has done. And what the agency has ultimately done, it's been a part of a larger agenda from the left, from the Democrat Party, to take over the reins of the entire U.S. economy so that they're calling the shots. And at the end of the day, it doesn't actually produce a lot of tangible benefit for the environment. But what it does is it increases costs and it takes away individual consumer decisions that you and I want to make, what kind of car we want to drive, whether or not we want a gas stove in our kitchen, what types of appliances we have throughout. All of those were derivatives of this effort by the left to take a law at EPA, expand the reach of that authority, and slowly but surely take over decisions and hand them over to people who want to push things like the Green New Scam.
Mandy Gunasekar is my guest. You need to run, or you got time to hang for a few more minutes?
Yeah, I've got some time.
Let's continue the conversation with Mandy Gunasekar. George in Greenwood says SuperTalk and Paul Gallo, or one of his substitutes, introduced us to Mandy a few years ago, but last week Eric Erickson named her as one of 4 lawyer strategists who deserve the most credit for undoing the endangerment finding on carbon dioxide. That made her a superstar in my book. George, Mandy wasn't a superstar when we gave her to you. It had to be Eric Erickson. We've made Eric Erickson a superstar by putting him on SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm kidding. Outstanding praise from Eric. We're back with more after this.
After all the text, more of the best of Mornings with Richard Cross next.
On the John Deere Compact.
This is an encore presentation of the best of Mornings with Richard Cross.
This segment of Mornings with Richard Cross is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters. Pleasure to be with you. It is Mandy Gunasekar is my guest, former Chief of Staff at the EPA. That was during the first Trump administration. She joins us now. And given the amount of time that you and others had worked on deregulation, especially during the first administration, how much satisfaction was there when this announcement came from Lee Zeldin in the White House last week?
An immense amount of satisfaction. And it actually goes back to work I did in the U.S. Senate going back to 2015. I had the benefit of working for Senator Jim Inhofe, who really is one of the leaders of what happened last week with the announcement of getting rid of the endangerment finding. And it's because he was a man that was willing to stand up, ask questions, and seek the truth on something like climate change, which was really, really hard back in the day. He faced a lot of ridicule, and he didn't let that bother him with sticking to the facts. So I had the benefit of working with him and many others and was able to continue that momentum forward, ultimately to that announcement that the administrator made last week.
Mandy, I'm curious, this very big picture question. Can you say climate change is real and say at the same time, but the way that we're going about all of this and trying to change climate change is just dumb?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the climate has always been changing, but the idea that man can control it or the weather, it's more of a testament to the hubris of man versus being able to come up with effective policies. Something we used to say all the time, these regulations were all pain, no gain. They were all economic pain, they were all inconvenience, and they came with massive cost or reduction of access to things that actually worked when you need them, like reliable, affordable energy, which tends to be very critical when the weather changes. So yeah, absolutely. The policies have been very problematic. The climate policies, elements of the Green New Scam is the way the president talks about them. The policies have been very problematic. They have done little to change the trajectory of emissions. Like I said earlier, what has actually resulted in fewer emissions here in this country is because of private sector innovation. And the reality of the federal government getting involved is that they tend to hinder that innovative development on the private sector in a lot of different ways, whether it's through permitting requirements or just trying to shut certain industries down. And then it's susceptible to being politicized, like we saw. The left use fear and confusion around climate change to try to push policies they could not get passed in Congress. The reason that these greenhouse gas regulations were put on the books is because then President Obama, could not get the House to pass his cap and trade legislation in a Democrat-controlled Senate. So he turned to his, quote, pen and phone initiative, and he started pushing these illegal actions through the agencies to ultimately save face and get the agenda done anyway.
Not to mention the hypocrisy of the climate change advocates that jump on a private plane and fly halfway around the world because of convenience, but don't mind putting inconvenience on all of us in our daily lives.
Oh, absolutely. You think of people like Bill Gates, who's had a recent change in tune, Tom Steyer, Leonardo DiCaprio. There's a lot of famous people that fly around in their private jets. They live. If you care about your carbon footprint, they have the biggest carbon footprints, but they're telling all of us that we need to live in cities where you can walk everywhere, the 15-minute cities or whatnot, or to all stack up in condos with shower heads that don't work and toilets that don't really flush. Richard, I just thought of something that I think the listeners will appreciate is if you look at the pinnacle of international climate science, it's these reports put out, air quote reports, put out by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And then you look at something like the Farmer's Almanac. The wisdom and the reliability of the Farmer's Almanac has consistently been more reliable than all the climate scientists, all the experts of all the globe that are put out in these quote unquote reports. So it just goes to show you that this is really at the international level, this climate science has been overtaken by political agendas and those trying to push a globalist view of the world, which is on its way out and it's totally breaking down.
And by the way, I don't begrudge them their private planes and their boats. I'm probably jealous of that, but just like I don't need you to shove that down my throat when you're getting on your G650. All right, practical question. We've had multiple people that have texted this, sent it to us on the C-Spire text line. It's something I was going to ask you. What about DEF? Are diesel truck drivers listening across the state of Mississippi? And we recognize a difference in heavy diesel and kind of medium weight diesel. I don't think I used the right language for that. Let's see, heavy duty and medium duty. Heavy duty trucks since January of 2010, medium duty since 2014-ish, where you've got to put DEF or diesel exhaust fluid in addition to your diesel fuel.
Yeah, so this is an indirect impact on that piece. The fuels are actually regulated under something called the Renewable Fuel Standard, and that is a different battle to be had for sure. But there are a number of elements within the heavy duty vehicles. A lot of this has to do with onboard diagnostics. That's going to mean a lot to the truck drivers out there. That will not be as complicated, will be taken away, and it means that the drivers are in trucks that if they break down or if they have problems on the side of the road, they can actually fix it versus having to go in and connect to a computer and have to deal with a lot of overcomplicated systems. When we have solid diesel engines, we have efficient fuel systems that essentially scrub out the majority of the pollutants, not all of them, and they run fairly efficiently. All the rest of it is just additional noise and additional cost. So they will see a reduction of some of those, but on the fuel side, that is mostly regulated through something called the Renewable Fuel Standard.
So bad news. If you're driving a Ford F-250 Super Duty, you're going to have to keep putting DEF in it for at least a while longer. Bigger picture at the EPA, are there other areas of deregulation that they are still looking at? What's the next battle?
Yeah, there are a ton. The next one, it's even nerdier, if you will. It's the permitting reform area. But what it means for the person who owns or works at a big factory, we have one here, Winchester, is that there are ways that existing industries can add in new technologies, but at EPA, you can take, let's say that's $1 million investment. By virtue of these permitting requirements, it turns into $1 billion liability. So that has obviously prohibited people from integrating new technologies that make things run better, and it means that you're spending more money on building out your workforce or producing a better product. That is one of the next big categories that EPA is going to tackle that will have a very meaningful effect. But it doesn't sound that great. It's just permitting reform, but it's actually a really big issue and something we started fighting early in the last administration as well.
Yeah. The forced transition to electric vehicles that we were seeing in some places, especially in California, does this go away when we look at this most recent, not legislation, but this most recent edict that's come down from the EPA and the Trump administration?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that's sort of phase two of this is some of these state-specific laws. California has passed state-based climate legislation that still puts additional requirements for their consumers to purchase these electric vehicles or to seek out these quote-unquote zero-emission vehicle credits. There's going to be an ongoing fight as to what is the reach of the federal law. Ultimately, they should be preempted, meaning the federal law rules the day, and those state requirements are illegal, but that is going to be a continued fight. Yeah. For the rest of the country, it's ultimately up to the consumer. If you want an electric vehicle, they're out there. Richard, you know, I drive a Tesla. I love my Tesla, but it works for me, and I bought it because Elon was about to buy Twitter, and I wanted to support him in his fight for First Amendment speech. That was my way to support him. But nonetheless, if you don't want a Tesla or you don't want an electric vehicle, there's going to be an affordable, efficient, gas-powered vehicle that's going to be able to get the job done for you, and it's going to be available going forward.
Yeah. Great stuff this morning, Mandy. Last thing, we got less than a minute until the break. This rollback of the endangerment finding, does it become permanent, or the next time a Democrat wins the White House and puts a Democrat chief at the EPA, do they just roll it right back in place?
Well, the next step is the legal fight. This is going to be challenged, but we're prepared for that. We've been working on this for a long time, and because of things like Loper-Bright doing away with agency deference or trust the experts era, that is all gone. We're in a much stronger legal seat. And if a future administration wanted to reinstate this, it would be really, really difficult. They would have to build out a record of science that just isn't there. And really important, the veil has been lifted for the public. The difference between true science and politicized science, and that's going to be a barrier for them to get over as well.
Mandy Gunasekra, former chief of staff at the EPA, spending some time with us this morning. Thanks so much for joining us. Great stuff.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We'll talk again soon. Richard Cross, Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk Mississippi. Mandy Gunasekra, always a wealth of information. We'll take a time out. MRC presented by Community Bank. Back with you right after this.
More of the best of Mornings with Richard Cross next.
This Good Friday
It's an encore presentation of the best of Mornings with Richard Cross.
Perfect bumper. Perfect.
bumper for this. Welcome back, Mornings on SuperTalk Mississippi, and we are joined now by the Vice Chair of Public Health and Human Services in the Mississippi House, Representative Kevin Felsher, and Kimberly Hughes, the Government Relations Director for the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. Good morning. How are you guys doing today?
Good morning.
Now, we have something unique, Representative Felsher. I understand there was overwhelming support for the biomarker bill, Jill's Law, as they call it, in the House and the Senate, right?
That's correct. In the House, we passed it 117-0. And in the Senate, I think it was similar numbers as far as being unanimous.
And that is rare these days, it feels like. Now, you were a co-sponsor on this bill, and you actually presented it in the chamber. Tell me a little bit about the importance that you see in this bill and getting it signed into law.
It's very important. What we know is that biomarker testing provides the right treatment at the right time. It eliminates this trial and error where patients are just given medications and let's just wait and see if that works. Every minute counts when we're talking about the treatment of cancer and other diseases. And we got it across the finish line to the governor's desk, and I'm hopeful that he'll sign that.
Now, Kimberly, with the Cancer Action Network, American Cancer Society, you can speak a little more to just how important this is on a scale of 1 to 10 for people who get a cancer diagnosis or are dealing with cancer. Scale of 1 to 10, how big is this for them?
This is definitely a 10 plus. We've made huge advances in scientific evidence in cancer treatment, and this really helps bring the insurance coverage, to date hasn't kept up with those scientific advances. So this really, does that for cancer patients.
Well, and I'll come back to that in just a second. Representative, specifically, tell us exactly what this bill does, what this law will accomplish and make happen.
Yeah, so we put together a Mississippi Cancer Care Coalition, and we met over this summer and the fall, and we discussed, heard testimony from many doctors, healthcare professionals, insurance folks, different people, and a common theme was the testing needed was being denied. And what this bill will do in simple terms is where there's an FDA approved and scientific supported biomarker test, the insurance company must cover it. And that's the gist of what the bill does. And what we're looking to do, Dave, is look, Mississippi's on the bottom on most appreciable outcome metrics when it comes to cancer and other diseases. And if we're going to move the needle and we're going to have a Mississippi healthcare miracle, much like we've had a Mississippi education miracle, we're going to have to change things. It can't be business as usual. And that is one of the hallmark pieces of legislation that will pass this year and hopefully be signed by the governor is this biomarker House Bill 565.
Well, and it is a big advancement in that regard, and that's why you rated it a 10 plus, Kimberly, and I think that's probably a fair rating on that. Talk to us, if you can, for a moment about the biomarker process itself. What does this process accomplish for cancer patients?
Well, this could be a simple blood test where, rather than, like Representative Felsher said, wasting time on treatments that don't work, that if you have certain biomarkers, there may be certain drugs that will work directly with that type of cancer. So it's not for all cancers, but if you do have, the precision treatment that will work, targeted therapy. So this will make a big difference in their cancer journey, in their quality of life, the cost savings and not wasting money or time on the best treatment for cancer. But also we had a huge coalition of other disease groups working on this legislation, Alzheimer's, arthritis, ALS. There's lots of advances being made in other diseases that uses biomarker testing.
Well, and the end goal here is to make healthcare not only more affordable but more effective at the same time. That's kind of a 1-2 punch, Representative. That's not bad work for a day.
It's not. And legislation like this in years past may have been unheard of, but I will say this year with Speaker White and Lieutenant Governor Hoseman, I want to say thank you to Senator Walter Michel, who chairs the Insurance Committee over in the Senate, because without him, this wouldn't have happened either. Just everybody coming together in terms doing the right thing. This is the right thing to do. It's also the smart thing to do. I think it's a lot cheaper to pay on the front end than the back end. If you're going to treat stage 1 cancer, it's a lot less expensive than treating stage 4.
Well, and Kimberly, but part of the problem, as I see it, and I may be completely wrong, please tell me if I am, is that it hasn't been that long ago that this was still considered somewhat an experimental process, but it's been verified scientifically, and there's no reason to continue forward with this. Does that stand in our way of getting coverage from insurance companies for other things that would be hugely helpful? They just haven't quite come around to it yet?
Right. They haven't quite kept up with those scientific advances. And this is fairly new. However, Mississippi will be the 23rd state if this becomes law. Hopefully, the governor has until Monday to sign it. But we will be the 23rd state in the country to pass this very important legislation.
And that's actually not bad. We're in the top 25. We'll take that as a result, Representative. We're moving in the right direction there, I think. And let me ask you this. In a time where it seems like there's a discussion and there's pushback on everything, it seems like these days, did you have a lot of that had to be navigated through, or was this pretty smooth sailing once it was introduced in the legislature?
In terms of past years, I would say it was pretty smooth sailing. I've never seen. I think a big help was the Mississippi Cancer Care Coalition putting forward some thoughtful recommendations and the data to back it up. And again, also a thank you to Angela Ladner, who helped a lot on that Cancer Coalition. But with that, putting forward those initiatives, we had some really great initiatives. We also repealed the metastatic cancer, which is basically the same theory, Dave. You don't want to have to do what's called these step therapies, where you turn patients into trial and error. You go for the best treatment you can get, the quickest you can get it to them. So circling back, I would say relatively in legislative terms, pretty smooth sailing. But I don't want to jinx anything.
You know, Representative Felsher, what he just said, Kimberly, how frustrating is it that you have to sell the idea of getting the most effective coverage to the patients as quick as possible? Because that's a reality. I mean, it went very well in the Mississippi legislature. They got it. They understood. They took action on it, overwhelmingly supportive action. But at the same time, do you ever just sit there and sigh to yourself some days, like, how is this such a difficult mountain to climb when it comes to care for people with these kind of conditions?
Yes, and we deal with that a lot with a lot of the public health and access to care issues that we work on, because it may be the best treatment and the right thing for the patients, but of course cost is also always something our policymakers understandably have to look at. But we are just thankful for the bipartisan support for this issue. I think the issue itself was voted on about 8 different times in committee and the full chambers, and there was not one dissenting vote throughout the process.
And that is just incredibly rare. I know I've said that already, but Representative, you'll back me up on this. That doesn't happen, does it?
On issues like this, no. I mean, we do work together a lot better than people think on most things, but generally speaking, on healthcare-related issues, especially mandates, it gets a little dicey, and on this one, it did not.
Well, and the full credit to the legislature, both the House and the Senate, for what they have pulled off with this. You talked about perception. You know, I think you bring out a great point, because we have fallen into the trap, everybody on planet Earth right now, of always looking for the negative. That's where the story is. That's what we're going to talk about. there's a lot of good work that goes on in the Mississippi legislature. If you guys can stick around through the break, I'd love to keep talking to you about all of this and about the biomarker and how soon we can see effects on that, if y'all can stick around.
Be my pleasure.
We will continue with Representative Kevin Felsher and Kimberly Hughes here on Mornings on SuperTalk Mississippi right after this.
More of the best of Mornings with Richard Cross next.
This is where the story of your state gets told each day. We're proud to cover the Magnolia State like nobody else. SuperTalk Mississippi.
Polyupa, Mississippi is an encore presentation of the best of Mornings with Richard Cross.
Welcome back, SuperTalk Mississippi Mornings. On a Friday morning, Dave Hughes here, Representative David Felsher, Vice Chair of the Public Health and Human Services Committee, and Kimberly Hughes with the American Cancer Society's Cancer Action Network. Before the break, you made a comment about the fact that we always hear about when the legislature is at loggerheads with one another for one reason or another. We don't hear about the issues and the things that come up like this, where it was unanimous across the board. Everybody pulled in the same direction. Now, of course, that doesn't happen just automatically on anything, but we don't spend enough time pointing out that there is work that gets done in the Mississippi legislature and done well with a lot of wide-ranging support, right?
There is. If you look at our votes, many of them are unanimous. When you get to cultural issues or issues of criminal justice reform, things like that, it gets a little bit more dicey. But, there's not a colleague in the House that I wouldn't go to dinner with. And I would say they probably feel that way about me. And we work well together. We like each other. We're not always going to agree on everything. Not within our own party and not with the other party. But the big thing, Dave, is civil discourse, respect, and doing what's right for the people in Mississippi. And I think if you have that and you do that, it's always going to work out well in the end.
Well, the effect is just like you're in a crowded location, a concert, a bar, a restaurant, whatever. You may not notice the couple sitting quietly and getting along wonderfully. Now, the couple fighting in the other booth, oh, yeah, everybody's watching them. And that's the effect that we get with politics all the time. But sometimes we have to cast light on the good things like this. Kimberly, I don't want to call it technology, even though it is. And it's not even a recent development. It didn't just come up this year that this was developed. What are the statistics? What are the numbers on how much this improves treatment outcomes for cancer patients? Do we have those?
We are slowly getting those from the other states, some of the early states that passed this. I don't have those numbers, but the past 2 or 3 years, states that have enacted this, we're starting to get those numbers. We have some cost figures, how it's very minimal cost. We did a fiscal note on this bill, and it's very minimal, especially when you consider the offsets. Think about the cost of chemotherapy it's one thing if it works, but if it doesn't work and then you have to start over with something else, you've wasted a lot of time and money there. So we're starting to see those numbers come in, but don't quite have them yet.
Well, I suspect they're going to tell a really good story when those numbers do come in. And we always focus on the money, especially when you're dealing with a situation like this with insurance and coverage and everything else. The money is what you focus on. But there is an additional cost to, say, an extra year of chemotherapy for a cancer patient that if you had a different treatment that was targeted, they might not have to go through. And I think we don't overlook that, but we don't focus enough on that either.
Right. And we have so many stories. You know, we may not have the larger data, but we have lots of individual patient stories, and I think that's one thing that's really helped us through this legislative process is those cancer patients, cancer survivors sharing those stories. We have a survivor from DeSoto County, former Senator David Parker's wife, is still going through biomarker testing to test for recurrence of cancer. So she was a big voice at the Capitol with us that shared her story and how it continues to benefit her, and she really attributes her being here today because of biomarker testing.
And it's really hard to argue with that kind of testimony and that kind of story, because if you haven't been through it, how are you going to tell someone who has and has benefited from it that they don't know what they're talking about? That probably made it a little easier sell in the legislature, Representative.
Well, it did, and we did name the bill after my colleague and a former schoolmate of mine, Jill Gary-Ure. And what that bill did for her, you had mentioned, about the extra year of chemo treatment, but I thought about maybe the extra year or two of her life that she got to see her children and spend time with her family, exchange words, hugs, and kisses, that she wouldn't have had but for the biomarker testing. And that's what makes it important to me. You can't put a time value on life like that.
Well, I have to say this, and I know Kimberly will join me in saying this, but we don't get a lot of opportunities where we get to watch a member of the Mississippi legislature get told, good job, unreservedly. I mean, this was a good job across the board by everyone. And hopefully we'll continue that trend and keep doing things that way when they really matter, like this one. I appreciate so much both of you coming in and taking the time to be with us. Any final thoughts from either one of you?
For me, I'll just say thank you for having us on this important issue. And Chairman Creekmore and I and Speaker White plan to keep moving the healthcare needle in a positive direction for Mississippi.
Kimberly?
And I just ditto what you said to thank our legislative champions, because that really made a difference in getting this across the finish line. Almost.
Thank you so much, guys. Keep up the good work on a very good cause.
More of the best of Mornings with Richard Cross next. This is an encore presentation of the best of Mornings with Richard Cross.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Senator, good morning.
Hello, Richard. Glad to be with you.
I appreciate your time. There is a lot going on in the Capitol, and there seems to be a fair amount of anxiety among a lot of your constituents about some of what is going on. Obviously, we have the conflict in Iran. We've got DHS funding, but let's start with the SAVE Act and where that is right now. From where we sit, it appears to be fairly gridlocked. A lot of conversation about a talking filibuster and what the right way to go about getting this legislation passed is. What can you tell us, sir?
Well, here's the issue. We need to make it easier to vote in America and harder to cheat. And part of that is voter ID. It is really surprising that so many Democrats are spending hours and hours defending the idea of someone going in and voting without providing an identification card. Mississippi led the way in this,
right?
More than a decade ago. Took it all the way to the Justice Department when we had to have pre-clearance, and it's been upheld by the Supreme Court. So there's an easy way to do this. We provide in Mississippi a free identification card, so nobody is discomforted or disadvantaged by just having an ID card, which we all have to get on airplanes or whatever. And presenting that's the main issue right there is that in some states people actually do not have to prove who they are. A neighbor can come in one state and say, "Oh, this is so and so and so and so. I know them. I'll vouch for them." Well, that's just ripe for fraud. So we're trying to cut out fraud, make it harder to cheat, easier to vote.
One of the hang-ups seems to be the proof of citizenship to register for new voting. Is this an issue where Democrats have just chosen to get off in the weeds to try and hold it up? Is that a canary in the coal mine, or is that a legitimate concern?
Well, it is important that citizens be the ones that vote, and with what the Democrats have done the last couple of Democratic administrations, it's more of a concern than when I was registering to vote at age 21. And yes, but it's fairly easy to do that. Almost everybody has a birth certificate. And if you don't, there are other ways to prove that under the law. But to me, the main thing is just folks coming in and saying I'm John Doe and Jane Doe, and not having to just show
they're actually not
anything.
Well, one thing that has, I think, flown a little under the radar are the Trump accounts, the savings accounts where the One Big Beautiful Bill provided money for these savings accounts to begin with a government contribution. Parents can contribute to those. Is that getting traction?
Well, I hope to help it get more traction. I'm going to have an event. We haven't quite nailed it down, but my idea is I'd like to just have a big public event at the Children's Mansion, at the Children's Museum, perhaps fairly soon in Jackson. But this could be a game changer because whether you're from the lowest income family in America or the richest billionaire, every child born last year and this year and the next 2 years will automatically, all you have to do is file for it, get $1,000 in an account which is invested in safe investments. And so this gives everybody an opportunity, not just the members of the upper middle class, an opportunity to have something that's the equivalent of college savings account. I think it's a game changer. And I'll tell you, I've got a new grandchild born in September last year. She's going to get $1,000 in an account. Can't be spent till she's 18, but that will grow. And even if it's just left in really a very modest government secured account, that will be worth $7,000 by the time she's 18. And of course, our hope is that parents will maybe put $10 in a month, something like that. If that happened, then you're getting on into 5 and 6 figures. If you just add to that. Previously, it was just people in a higher income tax bracket, and they would form college savings account like we have in Mississippi and like the federal government has. But this is an opportunity for every single child to grab a hold of the American dream. And then Michael Dell, who invented Dell Computers and is a multi-billionaire, he and his wife are going to provide $250 per year to those children born between 2014 and 2024. So again, older children that are missing out on this 4-year period of contribution. I just think it's a way for everybody to be watching how our corporations and how our government are doing, and realizing that this is the greatest economic system ever designed, and my goal is to make sure every single baby born last year and this year in Mississippi knows about this.
It's an incredible starter fund.
So their parents know about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an incredible way to start, and if parents will donate just a little bit to that on a recurring basis on top, then that's got a chance to be really, really significant for children. Well, and who knows, it could change a generation.
Well, employers can decide to add, in addition to whatever hourly rate you're making or weekly. As an incentive to get good employees, the boss man could kick in, and that would be another way to add to these. But at the end of 18 years, every American child is going to have an asset that's usable. And, of course, they can leave it in there and use it for college and things like that.
Sure. Senator Roger Wicker is my guest. We've got just a couple of minutes left with him. I'd like to touch on two things if we've got time. Let's start with Iran. By many, many measurable points or data points, this operation has been a success. But
I think so.
There's also this, what's the end game and how long does this last, and do we put boots on the ground? You obviously are in a position where you are getting tons of briefings about what's happening and the progress. What can you tell us?
Well, I can tell you that what we learned last week is that Iran is capable of sending a missile much further than we thought. And whether that worked perfectly last week when they tried to send something over to that Indian Ocean island area of Diego Garcia, whether it worked or not, we know that's their intent. And we needed to do this when we did it. I think the president made the right decision. I was in the service. I was in the Air Force when the Ayatollah and his radical Shiite group took over Iran, and they have been killing Americans, trying to kill far more Americans for all these years. This was a good opportunity, and clearly they were trying to reconstitute their nuclear program and also trying to get good at sending space missiles to attack us and our friends, and sending 2,500-mile intercontinental ballistic missiles. And I'm glad they did it. The end game is going to be when we think they're no longer a threat to the United States of America, and when the neighbors in that area feel comfortable that they're able to handle the situation.
And finally, Senator, with only a minute left, this DHS funding fight, we find out that ICE is headed to the airports. You've seen the pictures. You've seen the lines that people are waiting in to try and get on flights. A bit of a mess, maybe not a bit of a mess, a huge mess right now. Does the SAVE Act have to come first before DHS gets funded?
No, I really think that the top priority should be we have to fund DHS. And I don't know if you've seen this, but there was a fatal collision at LaGuardia International Airport in New York just last night, and very much a part of that was a directive by an air traffic controller who on the recording you can hear him say, "I messed up." I expect that guy had way too much to handle with people not reporting for work, but I think that'll be an impetus for us. We need to fund this department, and whatever changes need to be made can be made in debate to the next time the reauthorization of that bill comes up. But in the meantime, we need to open all of this back up and not risk having yet another collision.
Senator Wicker, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Richard. Have a good week.
Good catching up with you. It's Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk Mississippi, presented by Community Bank.
More of the best of Mornings with Richard Cross next. This is an encore presentation of the best of Mornings with Richard Cross.
Woke up this morning. funny feeling. And that feeling was an unusual feeling.
How are you feeling this morning? Have you had your breakfast yet? Was it a healthy breakfast or was it an American breakfast? Because there is a difference, right? Many of us grew up with that bowl of cereal, basically a bowl of sugar. We had toast with that. We'd have a glass of orange juice. Maybe Mom would make eggs and pancakes to go along with it on a Sunday morning. It's no secret. Come on, folks. We all know. Not only does Mississippi struggle with obesity, but we now have been named and listed as the most obese country in the world. Most obese country in the world. As of 2025, approximately 12% of American adults, that's roughly 30 to 40 million people, have been taking a GLP-1. You know, Ozempic, Wegovy, you see the ads all the time. And that usage is rising rapidly, particularly among women, the ages of 50 to 64. Another 14% of Americans are expressing interest in using these medications. The question is, are these medications safe? And we're learning some things that are alarming about them. We've heard about depression. We've heard about muscle loss. But is there a place for them? And our guest this hour is going to be talking about this epidemic. And for those of you that are politicos that think that this should be all about politics today, let me tell you right now, it is about politics, because let me tell you, it is costing us hundreds of billions of dollars every year to treat and take care of obese Americans, diabetes, hypertension, heart problems, heart disease. So this is an important time to listen. Maybe you need to change your lifestyle a little bit, be a little bit healthier. Maybe you know someone who does. And if so, this is the hour for you. This hour we're talking with Dr. Brian Lantrip. He is a radiologist, was working as an ER doctor for many, many years. But the big point of his life has been his yo-yoing of weight. Good morning to you, Brian.
Good morning.
You look fantastic walking in today. You could never tell by looking at you that at one point in your life, you weighed over 400 pounds.
Tapped out at 405, yes.
That man that weighed 400 pounds then and the man today, what is the biggest difference for you?
Well, the biggest difference now is I've been a king of losing weight. I mean, in the interest of being transparent, I had a gastric bypass when I was 38. I weighed 405 then, got down to 235, maintained it for 8 years, started slowly going back up like we all do. Every January I'd start a new program, be it Weight Watchers or Jenny Craig or whatever. Would lose weight, not all of it, gain it back. In other words, that classic yo-yo. Until about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, I'd really basically given up.
When you say given up, what do you mean?
Well, when you've had as many, quote, diets as I've gone through. I was 11 when I was on my first diet.
11 years old?
11 years old, yes.
Did your mom put you on that diet?
No. I was very aware that I was overweight as a child. I would ask my mother, and, this was back in the 70s, you just didn't you didn't know a lot about nutrition. We knew about the food triangle, but you just didn't talk about nutrition. And so I reached out to my mother, and we did something. I think it was like one of the 3-day diets that you did. And I think I remember.
Remember the grapefruit diets, the pineapple diets, the Hollywood diet,
banana diet, the hot dog diet.
The hot dog diet.
Oh yes. It's nasty. Yeah. But 11 years ago, when I felt like I'd given up, I went to go see one of my med school classmates at Rightway Clinic here in the Metro Jackson area, Jeff Hubasak, and very tearful that day. Very hard to come in. And when people go to these places, the hardest thing they do is walk through the door. But I tell them, now that I practice obesity medicine, I say, you just did the hardest thing. Now it's time to get you started on your weight loss journey. You've done the hardest thing. From here on out, it's all easy. And that's sort of a misnomer. But at the same time, that stepping forward and saying, I've got a problem, I'm overweight, because we all know it. We don't need people to tell us. But the difference now is that, instead of being just the king of weight loss, I've actually learned how to maintain it, because there are 2 phases in weight reduction. There's the weight loss phase, and then there's the maintenance phase. In weight loss, you're trying to look for foods that will help you lose weight. But when you reach maintenance, you're trying to look for foods that don't allow you to gain weight. And there's a lot of overlap between those 2 foods. And it doesn't mean you can't have celebrations or you can't have these foods. You just can't have it every day. You and I have talked, we have become more of a sedentary nation. We're not as agricultural as we used to be. We're not as industrialized as we used to be. I told you before that if you and I had met 100 years ago, odds are both of us or one of us would work on a farm or in a factory. We'd burn 8,000 calories. We could get away with stuff like that. We can't do that anymore. And so, look what we're doing right now. We're sitting.
We're sitting, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And, they say sitting's the new smoking. Great. I'm a 2-pack day kind of guy. But so that being sedentary, we're needing to alter the way we eat. And I learned that, in fact, from that very first day when I went to go see Dr. Hubasek, I didn't call it a diet, because people think of a diet as something we endure, something you get through.
Short term,
right? Well, short term, long term, but their definition of long term is not lifetime. And so I changed from that day. I said, no, I've got to find a new way, a new lifestyle, something that's going to allow me to lose the weight, to become healthier, to become happier. And so I never called it a diet. And so I slowly but surely made behavioral changes, because the 4 pillars of successful weight loss, medications to help suppress your appetite. And I'm a big believer in that, because I think there are people that walk on this earth that do have neurotransmitter imbalances. And I'm not talking about depression and anxiety and things like that, but I'm just talking about in terms of the hormones and neurotransmitters that interact with our appetite. There are some people that don't have enough anti-hunger hormone, leptin, or maybe their receptors don't work as well. A study many years ago about The Biggest Loser found out that 15 or 14 of the 16 contestants, when you lose your weight, and they lost weight, as they all did, their leptin levels, their anti-hunger hormones went down. But when they regained the weight, and they found out that their leptin levels didn't come back up. So there are reasons why it's no longer a willpower, a calories in, calories out. There are hormones in play here. And so medications to help suppress your appetite is one. Nutrition is another. Now, there are a lot of ways to, as I say, skin that cat. Everyone talks about low carbohydrates, and that is one of many. But there's the Mediterranean diet, the pescatarian diet. There are several ways of eating that, one size does not fit all. You know that as well as I do. The third thing is physical activity. And, it doesn't mean necessarily joining a gym. I tell patients, park further away from the front door. Take the stairs into the elevator, especially if it's only 1 or 2 flights. I don't take 10 flights. I don't want to die of a heart attack by the time I get to the top. But the last one that I make a big push, that I try to press upon people, is behavioral changes. Something it's not something you consciously do all the time. Although I tell patients, put your phone down, turn off your TV. When you're eating, really pay attention to what you're eating. Try to figure out, why is it that I like this food? Is it the taste? Is it the texture? Is it the crunch? Does it put me in a better mood? And if it does, if it's a food that will help you lose weight, by all means, more power to you. Send me the recipe and we'll make a gazillion dollars on a cookbook.
We're one of the only societies in the world that eats in our car.
Oh, that's the truth.
Right? Think about that, and think about mindless eating. We go through a drive-through, we go through a box. One of the things that when I'm like you, I've always yo-yoed, and being in television news, you couldn't afford to be fat. I know fat's a bad word, I'm sorry.
No.
It's not a 4-letter word, but it's a 3-letter word, and it's bad.
It's bad. I know. My mother told me not to say
I was fluffy. My sister would say, we were fluffy.
That's right.
But yeah, I can remember many times driving in a news car through a drive-through. You drive through, you grab something, and, it's the worst food for you. Doesn't mean you can't have it. You just can't have it all the time. And when you eat that all the time and you're eating in a car, you're on a phone, you're eating in a car, you're driving, you're not paying any attention to what you're putting in your body or the fact that you're tasting what you're eating, right? And I think that's part of why, besides the sedentary aspect, we eat in a car. The French don't eat in the car.
No.
Germans don't eat in their cars.
They do not.
Right? So, it's a lifestyle, behavioral change, right?
Right.
Nothing out of a box is what I used to say to myself. Right. A drive-through box or a box that, if grandma didn't recognize it,
right.
Nowadays that's interesting though, because you say grandma, I'm a grandma. So,
hard to believe.
Things that are, that I would have eaten as a kid, are very different than what my grandmother. Nutritional foods are different now now too, though. If you eat a fresh chicken off a farm now, or you get eggs from a chicken in a farm, not the grocery, it tastes different.
It does.
And so I think nutrition has really suffered over the years in our country too, don't you think?
Oh yes, ultra processed foods, fast foods. When back in the 50s, early 60s, when fast food started becoming much more of a commodity, why cook? Let's just go out to eat, or why? We're on our way home. Let's get something to eat. It was really not the way to do.
When World War II happened and moms went to work, it changed everything because moms no longer were doing 3 meals a day and cooking at home and watching what we're eating. We're talking about Dr. Brian Lantrip. He is a radiologist in town. Excuse me, it's the Dayquil working, but he's now an obesity specialist and counsels people that are looking to lose weight. We're going to talk more about the GLP-1s, the drugs that so many in Mississippi are on right now. Are they healthy, and what do we need to watch for in the future? There's some exciting news on the horizon. You're listening to Super Talk Mississippi. I'm Linda Allen in for Richard Cross this morning. Good to have you with us.
The best of Mornings with Richard Cross. Next.
He's Donald Trump.
This is an encore presentation of the best of Mornings with Richard Cross.
Doctor, give me the news. I got a bad case of loving you.
That's kind of how I feel about McDonald's French fries. I have to be very careful when I drive by because they're the worst for you. You know why they're crispy, right? They soak them in sugar.
Well, and they've got they've got a new burger out too called the Arch.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Alan's in the Delta listening this morning, and Alan says to us, citizens in the United States have more access to food than most other countries. So to me, where we rank in the world, it doesn't matter. And that is true. We do. When we go to a grocery store here, if you've been to a grocery store in Mexico or Europe or any other country, it is so different than what we have here. We have access to everything. And as we were talking about, so many drive-through opportunities. A systematic review just came out this month of 48 studies looking at GLP-1s, Wegovy, Ozempic, there are others that are there. And what it has found is that 60% of us who go on these medications, once we come off of them, if we haven't made behavioral changes, we put back 60% of that weight within the first year. Think about that. You lose 50 or 60 pounds on a drug. You think, oh my God, I look fantastic. My clothes fit. But if you don't manage that, within a year, 60% of that weight will come back. After 1 year, studies show that those on these medications who haven't made changes, 75% have all of their weight come back to them and more. That is extremely disturbing. It's very expensive. Our special guest this hour is Dr. Brian Lantrip, an obesity specialist in many ways, not just because of the education that he put himself through to learn more about what he believes are the 4 pillars to success of living a healthy life, but also because he personally has experienced it with surgeries, with medications, with yo-yo dieting, as over 400 pounds at one point. The most frightening, though, Brian, had to have been the time that you were working on your deck and that you realized you couldn't breathe. And then you end up in the hospital with cognitive heart failure.
Yeah, it was.
You're a doctor.
I know.
You should know better.
We're the worst patients. What can I say?
I can attest to that, right?
Right. Yes. 3 years ago, I'm admittedly in the best shape of my life, or at least I think I am. But 3 years ago, this May, was on my back deck trying to finish up the skirt. Felt okay that day. Next day was a little bit okay, but after that I started feeling short of breath, and I thought, oh, I have COVID again, because I got COVID back in the middle of the pandemic. I didn't do so well with that. I ended up having to get the monoclonal antibodies. That kind of hurt my feelings because on the outside I think I look okay, but evidently I wasn't. But within about a week I was diagnosed with congestive heart failure, and my heart function was so low. Had it been 5% lower, I would have been put on the cardiac transplant list. And,
shock of all shocks.
Really. And it was really, I was talking to your friend just a moment ago. We think we're immortal in our 30s and 40s, and maybe even our early 50s. But when something like this was just beyond your control, and it hits you. It really is hard. And so I was off work, binging a lot of TV. And after about a month, I told my wife, I said, okay, my brain's turning to mush. I need to do something. And I'd always wanted, since I'd been going to go see my weight loss doctor, Dr. Hubasek at Right Way, I'd always wanted to get board certified in this area. So I started studying because I'd never had time when I was working full time. And so I signed up for the boards. And because we were coming just out of the pandemic, there's a hybrid, because there are fellowships now available, 1-year fellowships for people who finish family medicine, pediatrics, or internal medicine mostly. And I was board certified in internal medicine, so I'm not just a pretty face. I can actually run a code in case someone needs it. But point being is that I studied for the boards. I took it that October and I passed. And I'm very passionate about this. I love helping people with this. GLPs, I personally have taken GLPs. I'd gained about 35 pounds during the pandemic, could not get it off. It took Dr. Hubasek about 6 months to convince me to take it, because at the time the only indications were for diabetes. And I said, I'm not going to take this. I'm not diabetic. Right. And when I took it, it was like, where have you been all my life? Because you name all the drugs that are out there, I've been on most of them, even some that have been taken off the shelf. Belviq, one of them. Depression's real with that. But the GLPs made me feel like I did when I had my gastric bypass, because it suppresses your appetite. It really does dial down what's called the food noise, the cravings. Other medications can do that, but if you want to deal with your cravings, like 11 years ago, I was taking Phentermine, which brand name is Adipex. I'm a chocolate freak. I love chocolate. I'd eat this board right here if it was covered in chocolate. But for the first 2 or 3 weeks, I had to abstain from it. And after about 2.5, 3 weeks, something happened I thought would never happen. My craving went away. But with the GLPs, it pretty much works the first or second day. I mean, there's no food noise whatsoever. You don't have the cravings. But the underbelly side of it is that sometimes it can suppress your appetite so much that you don't take in enough food. And that's actually, we have overindulgence. That's what we're talking about today.
Starving our bodies is not good.
Starving is not good, no. I mean, your body thinks it's just like you go into hibernation or you go into the winter. It thinks, oh, I'm starving, so it's going to shift your metabolism down and make it even more difficult to lose weight.
One of the things that you mentioned, and I'm going to kind of play devil's advocate here, but you talked about depression. Some of the studies that we're seeing show that yes, it does suppress your appetite, but it can also suppress your libido, your desire to do things, and it can make you pretty flat emotionally. And Ozempic has been known to do that with patients. I've seen that personally firsthand with some people that I know. And so there are negatives to these drugs as well, and you can't stay on the drug forever. But the hormones that you mentioned in the earlier block, how does someone know, and how can they be tested to find out if they do have these hormones that do create these additional problems that maybe I might not have or someone else might not have?
Well, I don't know if there's, I really don't know about, I'm not aware of facilities that would offer on a routine basis checking your hunger hormone level, which is ghrelin, or checking your leptin level. It is something that you can measure. But, and there's a lot of research into these. In fact, when they were in the article discussing the Biggest Loser contestants, they were interviewing a person from Pfizer who at the time was trying to come up with a leptin oral analog. And unfortunately, they were never able to bring it to market because they couldn't get the dose high enough to make it pass the acid in your stomach or what happens when you absorb it through your GI tract and it passes through your liver, which is the reason why a lot of the GLPs right now are injectable, because it bypasses that first pass effect that the liver does. The liver acts.
So when you're taking the oral ones that we see advertised, those are going through your liver?
Well, yes, because they're absorbed up through your stomach and your GI tract. Now, Novo Nordisk now has a Wegovy in the oral form, came out January the 5th. And it's really funny because they attached a molecule to it to allow it to withstand the acidity of the stomach and to allow the dose to stay high enough so when you do absorb it. And the acronym for it's called a SNAC.
A snack.
I think that's very ironic. I'm going to have my snack.
That's kind of ugly. That is kind of ugly. I've got a question for you from one of our listeners. They want to know your thoughts on retatrutide? Retatrutide. Mm-hmm. And if it affects the individual differently than GLP-1s.
Well, actually, retatrutide, which is a drug currently, they've actually finished phase 3 clinical trials in December. They're doing all the number crunching, getting ready to see what it does, what the actual percentage losses are, and ready to get it for FDA. It is actually, okay, so when we talk about GLP-1s, all the drugs that we talked about, semaglutide, tirzepatide, retatrutide, they technically are GLP-1s. Semaglutide is just a GLP-1 molecule. That's it. Tirzepatide is a GLP-1, but it has an added molecule, a GIP, or a gastric inhibitory peptide, attached to it. Where these two drugs bind in your small bowel to create the effects that they do create, semaglutide binds part of the receptor, tirzepatide binds the entire receptor. So in the trials that were actually with semaglutide and tirzepatide, and the last two in SURMOUNT trials actually pegged both of these against each other in both type 2 diabetics and non-diabetics. Tirzepatide caused more weight loss, and it makes sense. It's a bigger molecule. The effect it creates is much stronger. Retatrutide is a GLP, a GIP, and it has another molecule attached to it that affects the way the liver releases sugar into your bloodstream. Again, all these drugs started out as diabetic medications, so sugar metabolism regulation is key.
Johnny in West Point is asking about, he is taking Mounjaro, and he says he's plateaued. And so he's wondering whether or not that he should talk with his primary about upping the dosage or maybe changing the drug. Do people need to change drugs?
Oh, yes. There are different doses, and the key to when you're taking these medications, well, there are actually two questions. Number one, are you having bad side effects from the dose you're currently on? Nausea, belching, heartburn, abdominal pain, constipation, diarrhea. But the second question, and actually the more important question, because these are weekly injections, is it controlling your appetite all 7 days? If you take it on Monday and by Friday you're starting to get a little hungry, then it's time to go up to the next dose. Now, your listener who talks about he's maintaining, the questions I ask people when they hit a plateau or they're starting to maintain, number one, get out of your food rut. If you started eating foods in the same sequence that you're eating, start looking online for different recipes.
Be back right after this.
Spot check, Billy got down on his hands and knees. He said, hey, mama, hey, let me check you. All outrageous, she said, no, honey, not tonight. You come back on Monday, yeah, come back Tuesday, and then I
More of the best of Mornings with Richard Cross next.
This is where the story of your state gets told each day. We're proud to cover the Magnolia State like nobody else. SuperTalk Mississippi.
This portion of Mornings with...
This is an encore presentation of the best of Mornings with Richard Cross.
Good to be with you this morning. It's a fascinating discussion. Whether you're talking about the three coast counties with Harrison, Hancock, and Jackson counties, or you're talking about the lower 6 counties in Mississippi, a lot of natural resources there, population center there, history of success for major industry there. I got a message from a friend because we were talking about talking with Ricky about growth and whether or not the right thing, if it's what everybody wants. Buddy sent me a message, said, yeah, a lot of people don't want to grow. I'm one of those. That brings insane political lunatic failure from other places like New York. Growth is not always good. Any growth down here has to be the right kind, and northern liberals are not that kind. The folks coming from Louisiana are great, very welcome here. But we don't want to be another Texas. Business competition is great. Political insanity is not. And there's something to that. The catchphrase in Austin used to be, keep Austin weird. Oh, Austin's plenty weird. But I don't know that Austin has its soul anymore. It's gone from a place with some good live music and a few hippies and the University of Texas and Austin city limits and a thriving, growing town, but not explosively large, to a major blue city. Thomas said Austin now has Indian and Muslim soul. Maybe. And not everybody, lots of places don't want to be Austin. Had a guy that I respected a lot, didn't see eye to eye on everything, that had a dream of making Oxford the next Austin. Now, I don't know that he meant so at that scale, but maybe a smaller version. I don't want Oxford, where I live, to be the next Austin, Texas. No thanks. I'm out. I'm good. It's just not what I'm looking for. But that doesn't mean I don't want to see growth and jobs and opportunities. And I think that can kind of be the same conversation for the coast. I appreciate this question on the C Spire text line, 601-879-4395. This tax season, C Spire is helping your tax refund go farther. Right now, new and current customers can get 3 free devices plus 100 gigs of data for just $100. There's more to see at cspire.com. What is the question that I appreciate? It's this. What the heck is a mega site, and why does the coast need it? Here's why I appreciate that question. That is, we are making an assumption that all of you listening are longtime listeners and that this is like one big story with chapters in it and it never really ends. And like our conversations build on each other and we reference past guests. So maybe you're a new listener, maybe you haven't been paying attention. A mega site is simply a massive industrial location where all of the infrastructure work is done and you have a build-ready site for major industry to come in, which means you have not necessarily poured the roads in some cases, but you've gotten roads to the site. You have gotten plumbing infrastructure, sewage infrastructure, electrical infrastructure, all to that piece of property so that a business, if it's an automobile manufacturer, an aluminum mill, a major steel company, if you wanted to, those steel companies not really operating, an advanced manufacturer that needs a lot of power and a lot of space, they can come in and they can start building their building tomorrow. Tomorrow is a bit of an aggressive timeline, but you understand what I'm saying. They can come in, they've got their plans, they turn them over for approval, and they are ready to roll within a few months, as opposed to a few years with actual construction. It streamlines the process, and more states have gotten in the game of getting these places ready so that it's better and easier for big manufacturers. And then you hope that those big manufacturers come in and they employ hundreds, if not thousands, with good, high-paying jobs that contribute to the tax base, and you get the return into the local economy.
Thank you for listening to this encore presentation of the Best of Mornings with Rich.
A SuperTalk Mississippi Media production.